Hey guys, this is Mrs. Hickok, obviously, and I just wanted to kind of bring you up to speed on what we are doing in history. So where we left off was the election of 1800, and remember they had to vote on that 36 times, and it ended up being Thomas Jefferson getting the most amount of votes, and then Aaron Burr was his vice president, because it was first place and second place. And they had kind of planned that, but it had to go to the House of Representatives for several tie breaks. So just to kind of recap, George Washington did 2 terms. Then John Adams, the Federalist, had 1 term. Remember his abuse of power. People thought that he would crown himself king. He was not well liked. So he only did 1 term. He just had 4 years. He did run again against Jefferson, but he did not win. So Jefferson was our 3rd president, and Jefferson actually had 2 terms. Jefferson's first VP was Aaron Burr, and his second one was a man named George Clinton. During the time that Jefferson was in office, our country grew quite a bit. This was the time that Lewis and Clark was sent out on their expedition, if you remember that. And their goal, of course, was to find just how far this new continent went. They were to find the Pacific Ocean. So they went all the way with the help of Sacagawea, some people refer to her as. And they were able to go all the way to the Pacific. And the Lewis and Clark Trail is still a historic thing that you can find today. They were called the Corps of Discovery, and they kept little notebooks of all the plant life and wildlife that they found along the way. So under Jefferson, the country grew. Also, we had the Louisiana Purchase, which I'm going to show you a little video with Schoolhouse Rock on that in just a minute. We bought a huge chunk of land from Napoleon, who was the leader of France at the time, Emperor of France, if you will. And so the country did well under Jefferson. After 2 terms, Jefferson was no longer president. And his good friend from the musical Hamilton, if you remember that, his good friend James Madison ran for president. He was also a DR, a Democratic Republican. So James Madison became president. And it was during this time that we were starting to have some trouble with the British again. So here's the thing. The British kept some of their military forts along the Canadian border. Even though the revolution was done and we were starting our own country, some of the British military never really left. They just kind of kept their outposts. And as the American country was growing, the British started providing the Native Americans with... Sorry about that. My iPhone did that thing where the storage was full again. So the British were giving guns to the Native Americans, which was super problematic. Also, so I have this picture here, and this was something that was going on called impressment, and we're going to learn about this. So the British Navy was out in full force all around the world, and they would round up American sailors and basically kidnap them and say, you know what, you're British. Even though you're American, you are British. And over 6,000 sailors were kidnapped this way. So England, or Britain, was kind of ticking us off. They were definitely, as my dad would say, poking the bear. And we're like, really? Didn't we already fight you? Didn't we finish this? Britain and France were engaged in a war, that war that George Washington said we should not get involved in, if you remember that. That word neutrality, okay? The idea that, nope, we do not need to pick a side, even though France is our oldest ally. We are not, and we do a lot of trade with Britain, we are not going to pick a side. Another word we're going to explore is embargo. So America at the time under Madison decided, okay, we are not going to trade. We are not going to do any trade with France or Britain. They are not going to get our money. We are not picking a side. We are staying neutral. Well, this causes a problem because America needs the money from the trade, and Europe, France and England, need our supplies, especially our cotton and our lumber. So this is going to make things very interesting. And before we know it, we're going to have a War of 1812 on our hands. When did the War of 1812 start? 1812, of course. And this ties into modern history as well, because the last time that our Capitol building was stormed was in 1814 under the British. They did try to burn down the White House. There's still scorch marks underneath some of the construction. We're going to learn about how the British tried to set fire to the Capitol building, and Dolly Madison, who was the first lady at the time, rescued a very famous portrait of George Washington. So we'll talk all about that. So war is a-comin'. So stay tuned and we will learn all about it.